Welcome back to Friends from Work, a podcast about all things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A podcast that will be talking about Secret Invasion Episode 1.
Wow.
Our very first Disney Plus Marvel Studios miniseries since October 13th. So,
did you realize it's been almost a year?
It's a podcast that's hosted by me, Kyle Scunawell, and my newly mustached friend, Robbie Earl. That's right. If you're watching on Spotify or on YouTube, you can see this faint mustache coming in. I don't know how I feel yet. It's a little Luigi-esque.
This is all in service of raising awareness of our video component here.
Oh, thank you.
So for everyone that's listening and they're thinking, oh my gosh, what is this? Have to see it. Well, over on Spotify, we've got that now. And YouTube.
You won't be able to focus on anything we're saying except for just lasering in on your mustache.
But it's also fitting from like a sort of disguise perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like within I can't shapeshift, but I can do a little bit of...
And we have our hats on. That's a good point.
True.
You know
true.
what?
Yeah, I mean, by MCU standards, I'm unrecognizable.
Yep. And I'll throw my glasses on here if you're watching. Now, the black hat and the glasses, how would you ever know? You have no idea. This is our first show since October 13th, and as a side note, they're obviously getting the message of slowing these things down, or at least they understood that the pace they were at before was unsustainable, because that is the longest break we've had since Disney Plus started. So
yeah, and I think that last week we'll get into this later, but I think some film dates kind of swapped around to where I think also they're spacing out Marvel film releases. Potentially, it's still too far out to know, but I noticed we could be getting as few Marvel films a year as we have since like 2016, like early phase 3 stuff. So
the only film that got pushed up was Deadpool 3, which is unique. So that's May, and then everything else slid back. At this point, I love them announcing stuff. What's the point of giving them a date if it's just going to move so much? So, but I do like the announcements. We'll get into the news side of it on a different episode because, as I always say, there's no time. No time. We have a new show. Welcome back to Friends from Work, talking weekly Marvel projects here, and I am so stoked about it. Robbie, let's just get into it. Secret Invasion Episode 1. Before you give any spiel, before we give any kind of critical reaction, you've been so busy. So I genuinely have no idea if you liked it or not. You had to literally text me 2 days after our screener, Kyle, do you like it? I told you how I felt, but we're talking Episode 1 today. I want to really quickly actually start at the end and talk about a couple things at the very end of the episode. First of all, legit, I'm totally legit here. I've watched the episode twice. Can you help me explain a little bit of what went down at the very end? So Gaia meets with who we think is Talos, right? Mm-hmm. You caught this. She said that she's going to mark the bags, but then in the actual bombing, the bags are empty. And then it leads to one of the shapeshifters, taunting Fury with all these different people that he had seen throughout the day.
Right.
And then ultimately becoming Nick Fury and shooting Maria Hill, which, by the way, so that's the two things I want to talk about. Crazy, bold swing to kill Maria in the first episode here.
Yeah.
Okay. But okay, two things. We'll react to that in 1 second. Do you understand what's going on there? Did Gaia just lie about it? Or was she talking to a different Talos?
No, I thought she just lied. My understanding was that... She just straight
lied.
Yeah, because I think, which I felt was coming after we got the line from Talos to Fury and Hill where he was like, she's come back. Gaia's come back. Like I had that like, that feels like it was too easy. And so I was kind of looking for it in that final scene. And I think what she did was she made a point to tell them about the infrared spray so that they could use those bags as decoys and actually go through with the bombing. That was my read.
Okay, if you go back and watch it a second time, there's like a really strange cut right before he says Gaia's come back. It's mid-conversation, and then they walk towards the car, and it's a really fast edit. to Talos in the like meeting room, I almost felt like it was so fast that I was wondering if that was like another Talos or something.
Well, I did, I feel like the camera work here was so strange at times. I thought like there were moments like that where I was kind of, on the one hand, there were quick cuts or cuts that I had to. This is the first time I remember having to rewind mid screener like that because I was like, I wonder, like, will this app even let me rewind, because the Disney debut stuff is so intense, and I had to do it several times just to make sure that I was tracking. Especially when we're talking about a show with shapeshifters, and just making sure that I'm following the right person. So I feel like that's totally fair from my perspective.
That is fascinating. I didn't feel that at all. In fact, in my original tweet and in these notes, I tweeted that I kind of loved the unique cinematography. I liked the side angle of Ross running up the steps like sideways. I liked the zoom in of the owl shot where it's only half the owl and half not. I liked, synced with the music, them being chased up the staircase and the lights going on as they go up each staircase.
Yeah.
Like, I thought some of the cinematography things were actually really, really cool, but you seem like that was not the case.
Well, I'm kind of of two minds, because so the opening scene with Ross, I had seen whenever they released that 5-minute clip via the kind of secret website, which I thought was a really fun promo thing. And I was so stoked after watching that because, I thought the camera work there, really everything about that scene, I thought was perfect. It was such a cool way to open up the show and to kind of lay out the stakes, give you just the right amount of background for people that maybe have not watched Captain Marvel in a while or known like where all the players on the board are supposed to be. And so, in the camera work there, even when he's running down the stairs and you kind of see it from like a GoPro perspective, I thought was cool.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, no, so I'm with you. There was there were definitely a lot of cool camera work moments. I think I'm just a little bit torn because there were others that felt like I had that actual last scene with Hill felt to me like it, because of some of the cuts, it didn't feel as
oh wow,
like it didn't feel like as weighty as it should have, I thought. Like from a story perspective it does, and from a performance perspective, but it's like I'm almost, I don't know, there was so much going on so quickly, and I get that we had to do that to show that she was confused and thought it was Nick, but it wasn't Nick. But I was just, I couldn't, this is probably one that it'll be an interesting rewatch and probably benefit from that. But it was just like for as, a character that's been around so long, I feel like I wanted that moment to feel like a let's pause for a second and like soak this in kind of moment. And I don't know if it was just because they were trying to highlight the chaos of that entire situation, or because it was just like a probably just a read on my part that didn't jive. But I did, like, that's a note that I wrote down where it was like, again, like no issue with the story choice. I love the bold
which is
swing of
crazy,
it.
by the way, to kill that character this early on. And by the way, find out that Soren's dead, which is pretty crazy too.
Yeah, which I feel like that's being dangled out a little bit as a, like, not a mystery per se, but I mean, they haven't said exactly how she died, right? I mean, they're implying that she died via this kind of radical scroll group. But
I think that's going to be the point of the entire series, right? Is like literally, like their promo said, trust no one. So that, like, I think she's dead, but they're going to probably have all these little twists and turns of like, well, actually she was killed by, you know, Gaia shapeshifting as someone else, or somebody, you know, something we don't know, something shocking, or Fury did on accident, or that's not it, but you know,
or
something
maybe
like
Talos
that.
is Soren.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be like that for sure.
That is one thing that I wonder about, like the whole time I'm watching, because I know that they can all shapeshift like that. It's so hard. And I guess that's the point. And that's the paranoid thriller of it all, which I love. Like I literally never know if I'm looking at the actual character or if I'm looking at somebody impersonating the character, which is fun because it's like even a scroll, like even if it's like there's no reason why Talos has to be Talos, because scrolls can look like other scrolls. It's fun because it's like the potential for all these head fakes.
Yeah. Okay, let's go all the way back. Secret Invasion episode 1, directed by Ali Salim. And I may have gotten that wrong. There will be a group of writers kind of throughout, Kyle Bradstreet, Brian Tucker, and Jonathan Hirschbein, again, may have messed that up. You know the cast: Samuel L. Jackson, Ben Mendelsohn, Colby Smulders, Olivia Colman, Martin Freeman, Amelia Clark, Don Cheadle, Kingsley Ben-Adir. And there's a bunch more here with a few fun cameos coming, I'm sure. And then music by Chris Bowers. So, Robbie, I think this is a good spot for full disclosure here. We got 2 episodes of a screener, but you've been so busy. I think you've just seen episode 1, correct?
Right.
I have seen episode 2. So I was going to try to come in here and like pretend like I haven't, but I decided that's not the way to go about it. So, overall, briefly, I thought it was really intriguing. I liked the slower pace. Like, I like going to a more noir feel. I pointed out some of the lighting and cinematography things. Some of that I think you'll see more in episode 2. I thought that this first episode did a really good job of getting me intrigued, but this is what I'm just going to say, and then I won't say it again. If this first episode for me was like a let's go, the second episode's like a let's freaking go minus. So I get those a little bit blurred, some of my comments probably, because it's from both episodes. So what were your overall thoughts before we dive into some of the details?
Yeah, I think I'm as of, you know, having not seen the second one, I think I'm sort of in lockstep. There are so many things that I liked about this episode, so many more than I had issues with. I loved the character set. I loved the tone. I liked the music. I love, by the way, just because we don't often remember to highlight this, I really liked the theme graphics and song.
Yeah.
Like the whole intro I thought was really cool.
Which, by the way, is something that they have killed in all Disney Plus shows. They're all different, but they've all been fantastic. Like the Hawkeye one is incredible with the actual comic stuff. Some of the Loki stuff was really cool.
Oh, yeah.
With those credits going on.
The Miss Marvel one was not like that between the, you know, and some shows do it more on the back end than on the front end. Like She-Hulk had the art on the back end, kind of like Miss Marvel, but
even the Miss Marvel title card being all the different written things. Yeah. I mean, they've done that really well. That part's been amazing.
And I liked how immediately set apart this one felt, even like it's less
so jarringly different from what we've been getting. I mean,
less colorful.
Really, let's go back for a second. So different from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Very different from Quantumania. I'd go back. It's very different than Wakanda Forever, although probably closer to that.
Right.
But then very different from She-Hulk and Miss Marvel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost jarring to have this kind of a throwback style Marvel show.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me in certain ways of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I mean, that's the only, which is not, there are a lot of differences there, but it's genre-wise, like that's the only thing even close to what this is that Marvel's done on Disney Plus. And even that tonally was pretty different.
People keep saying this online, and I think it'll be cemented even more once you see the second episode, but you know, it's kind of been billed behind the scenes as Marvel's Andor. And I actually do think that there are a lot of parallels there. I have no idea how the whole series is going to turn out, so I don't know that exactly. Right. But it is definitely slower paced. Like Andor takes a while to get going. It's very dialogue heavy, which I prefer for stuff like this. I love like some of my favorite scenes are like Nick Fury with Olivia Colman's character, Sonya, I think her name is, and just the dialogue. Like that's the kind of stuff I like, but that's very similar to Andor. And I think that there's some like sad, dark things about it that will only get amplified in the second episode that feel similar as well. So I hope it turns out like that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're getting me excited for the second episode. I thought about that while I was watching this, the Andor of it all, just because you had mentioned that. And I can see that. I was talking to Candace about it, who did not watch Andor. And I was like, she didn't get to watch Secret Invasion, but was asking me how it was. And I was trying to talk about it in terms of Andor, which is ultimately unhelpful since it's a show that she also hasn't seen. But
nice work.
But you're right. But I was talking about how, it's sort of like it's a slow burn, but it's building towards something. And I mean, I do think it's a bit less of a slow burn than Andor was, in part because I am already invested in the characters, whereas almost all the characters in Andor were new introductions. But she said, why do shows feel like you have to work so hard to get some kind of resolution? Like, do you have to sit through slow burn? Like, can't it just? But I think, which is a fair point on the Andor side, but that's a different conversation to have here.
Time is a finite resource.
Candace is saying time is a finite resource.
I mean, I couldn't disagree more with anything that's happening right now, but I'll let you keep talking for sure.
But no, I mean, in all seriousness, I feel that in comparison to other Disney Plus projects, but to me, it's a really welcome. Like it didn't feel slow to me at all. It felt slow in comparison.
Sure.
But if anything,
in comparison to Guardians 3, it's slow.
Yeah. I mean, that's true, because Guardians 3 kind of kicks off immediately. But I think that it was almost the opposite in certain moments where, like I said, I really like the opening scene and how it lets us know what the threat is.
Yeah, and what's going on.
But I feel like there were other scenes where I wish that they had almost given us a little bit less information, and I may feel differently as we go further, because I was watching this thinking, we only have, unlike Andor, we only have 6 episodes. I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of twists, and they have to they're probably going to have to pack a lot of plot points into these early ones. But there were certain kind of exposition dumps that felt like the first scene where Fury and Hill and Talos are sitting together in the kind of living room area. It felt like there was so much kind of briefing thrown at us, and that was one of those very few cuts scenes, and it just felt a little bit like this is so much that I can track with it, but I almost wonder if I could have gotten this in little bits and pieces and then had to figure out what's going on and why are there 2 sets of scrolls, and are they together or against each other, and who's who. Like, I feel like they could have kept that as more of a laying out some clues, rather than Hill just saying, these are who we think the scrolls are, this is what we think they want, they, they're not harmed by nuclear radiation, like boom, 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 like there we go, like here's the plan. Where I feel like there could have been some more almost like slowly paced reveals out of that.
I'm stunned. One, this is not the vibe I thought we were going to have for the episode. So that's one I can't even process right now. 2, I genuinely thought if there was a show that Robbie was going to like, it was going to be this one more than most people because of how slow it was. So that is now catching me off guard. I guess I'd say back to that. Okay. First of all, I think you don't know what happens, and I think you're overweighting the exposition that was given there. Like, I don't think the show is just about that exposition. That exposition dump specifically, because I just watched it 10 seconds ago, was talking about that they're trying to get this bomb made. But then the bomb goes off at the end of the first episode, and I don't think the whole show is going to be necessarily just about leading up to that bombing.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I don't want to.
And I do think there is some part of it that they probably feel like they need to explain a little bit of what happened if you haven't seen anything. And so there's always that, like I would say I was watching this, and halfway through, one of the notes I actually said, and this is tooting our own horn here, but you should go watch our friendly reminder on YouTube, because that we actually nailed some of the sequences that they're talking about. Like we raised the question about like, what's Soren been doing? Well, you get that answer right away. Where's Gaia been? You get that answer right away. Like, there are a lot of things we talked about in that reminder. So actually, even me putting it together, I was thankful to have seen that ahead of time. Like literally this kind of confirmed. And Agent Ross, we talked a lot in our Saga So Far episode about Agent Ross, which we still haven't seen Agent Ross technically. We've just seen a scroll Agent Ross. And maybe we may not ever see him.
So first off, I'm highlighting some concerns that I feel. It's always hard with these shows versus films, right? Because
I don't like this at all. Like, I'm out.
Because we're jumping in and trying to evaluate without knowing the full picture. But I'm just, I'm airing some issues that like set off some beacons for me.
Can you get here with me? Can you say that, like, again, maybe my episode 2 is influencing this, but I feel like you kind of immediately 25 minutes in realize like, oh, this is upper echelon TV. Like the set design, most of the dialogue, the acting performances you're getting, like the visual, the different camera angles. Like, I feel like, can you get there? Like, you're like, okay, this is obviously like, I don't think we're going to have the same concerns that people had with certain things like She-Hulk or whatever, which we didn't feel, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, especially from a
visual
CGI perspective. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think what I liked the most with this episode, and I want to focus on this because this was my larger takeaway. Like, there are little nits that I had that may or may not even stick, but from like a zoomed out perspective, I was really, really happy with just the general approach. Not only what they're going for in terms of just a feel, but also kind of the roles that they're giving certain characters, I think are really interesting and make a ton of sense. Like, for instance, I had not really thought of Nick Fury as coming into this dealing with all this self-doubt. It makes so much sense with the arc that he's had. But I don't think that I had not prepared myself for this different version of the character. And I'm really loving that, because we've talked about how through the Infinity Saga, that was one of the real strengths, I thought, is for the most part, every time you saw one of the main characters, at least one of the Avengers, you kind of saw them having gone through some level of growth. And it's so fun to trace those arcs. And I love that we've always seen Fury be fairly confident.
Yeah. 3 steps ahead.
Winter Soldier is like the one exception where he's like, oh, but even then, he's like, I noticed. What do you think we're doing here?
Exactly.
Like, there's always this like, and the conversation he has with Hill, I love, kind of highlights that. Like, the Fury I knew was always 3 steps ahead.
Right.
And you never really know if he's like, whenever he's kind of captured by Olivia Colman's MI6 folks, he says,
I
let you capture me. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's right because he knows to set up the little camera on the owl.
Sure.
But you're not quite sure if that's him covering or if that was intentional. And so it's like, I love that. I love seeing kind of a vulnerability to the character. And then I'm not going to go through each character, but as another example, I love that Talos is dealing with his own, this war of allegiances, right? Like, am I with my friend of 30 years?
Right.
Or am I with my people? You know, because they're saying I'm betraying them. And you can see that kind of hurt him whenever he hears that. And then when like Fury kills another Skrull after he tells him not to.
One of the better parts right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, that's what I'm saying. The story, like, I really like, and just finally I think the whole idea, one thing that I was wondering about coming into this from a comics perspective is how large will the stakes be? How are they going? What's the kind of climax going to look like here? Because the Secret Invasion comic is, you know, it ends in kind of comic book event fashion where you have this full-on massive superhero against the Skrulls battle in Central Park. And they're huge, giant people, and it's like a straight war. And I knew that we wouldn't be getting that because this has not been billed as like a superhero type Marvel show as much.
Right.
But I wasn't really sure what the Skrulls were going to be after. And I thought that this makes so much sense to me. Like, I think the difference is in Secret Invasion, the comic, they're trying to actually take over and rule the humans.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas here, they're just trying to turn the humans against each other so they eradicate themselves and then just leave them the planet, which I think feels like a really natural MCU, like classic MCU adaptation.
Twist. Yeah, you can't exactly predict it, but you get what the source material is.
And the kind of the groundedness of it. You know, I feel like the early phase 1 and phase 2 stuff, for the most part, they were trying to make it feel more accessible. So
sure,
you would get like, you know, in like Iron Man 3 instead of the comic where Tony like actually figures out a way to inject his suit into his own biology.
Okay.
Like they didn't go that far, right? They just kind of, so I think it does feel it feels both comfortable to me and it feels like it's designed to be accessible to folks in a way that I think is kind of important for Marvel right now, when I think a lot of people feel like, not a lot of people, I think some people feel like the kind of zanier stuff has been harder for them to track.
Going back to your original point about Fury and Talos, I definitely feel like there's some brewing tension there, which I kind of like, that being a disagreement. I think ahead of time I would have thought, yeah, they're totally in lockstep and it's them versus other people. So I like there being some tension. And then secondly, yeah, you can definitely tell the influences of, they're doing like an Old Man Logan thing or a Mission Impossible, I think, Fallout, where, you know, you're too old for this. Or how about Skyfall, you know, with like Moneypenny and Bond, where it's like, you're too old, you're past your prime, you don't have it. And then it's like, no, like Nick Fury's going to find some way to still do it. That's kind of the vibe they're pulling from. This feels like an absolute perfect time to tell people about a few things, first of all, and then second of all, come back after all this with just my nitty gritty Marvel notes, not critiques of the show, but like this is a show that's going to, you know, lend itself to a ton of questions about what's happening and where it's going and whatever. But I want to tell people, you brought up the comics. First of all, you can check out Organic Price Books, which is our official comics provider, and you can get some awesome omnibuses from them using the promo code Friends from Work. But you also can check out Nerd Riot, which is this dope Star-Lord shirt that I'm wearing right now. Again, if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, they're our official merchandise, like nerd merchandise provider. And so go to nerdriot.shop, also promo code Friends from Work. But that's going to lead me perfectly into what I want to talk about today, because we are running a special if you go spend money at nerdriot.shop or Organic Price Books and you use our promo code Friends From Work, and you will receive a free month of Friends From Work Plus 2.0 Tier 2. If you're just finding our podcast, first of all, thank you. Click like, subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, etc. But we have another part of the podcast called Friends From Work Plus, which is some bonus stuff. And we recently just kind of reinvented how we're doing that. And we really encourage you to check this out. So if you like what you're hearing, you can get more of this stuff on Friends From Work Plus for $5 a month. If you want coverage of a lot of other stuff, you can pay $15 a month or even $25 a month for a bunch of other stuff, including films that are not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And we are covering the other biggest blockbusters of the summer, but we're just doing it on a podcast called Screensaver. So if you want to hear about Mission Impossible, if you want to hear about Dial of Destiny, we currently have Across the Spider-Verse out on there, The Last of Us out on there. If you want to hear that, that's all for free over on Screensaver. So be sure to subscribe to that podcast as well. So the big blockbusters of this summer are free on Screensaver. If you want even deeper dives into those blockbusters, those are over on Friends From Work Plus Tier 2. So just in general, check those things out. Robbie, maybe you can help lay it out a little clearer.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a perfect time to try Friends From Work Plus because of all the summer blockbusters that we're getting to kind of do some deep dives into background-wise. Like, we've had a ton of fun you'll see behind me that we have the Flashpoint comic that I got from Organic Price Books. We got to, in preparation for the Flash film that came out last week, go through the Batman 1989 movie, some of the Snyderverse stuff. And it's been really fun. Those are always some of my favorite episodes. And we've also, gotten to go through the Spider-Verse, universe, if you will, Into the Spider-Verse and then Across the Spider-Verse, which came out on the main feed for Screensaver. But I say all that because there are a lot of great comic booky projects coming out this summer. And so Organic Price Books and Nerd Riot both have a lot of fun things geared towards that.
Yes.
So if you're interested in either of those anyway, then go there and use our code, and then you get a free month of all of this bonus content that we're talking about. So
Absolutely.
Win.
So again, just to reiterate, The Flash, for example, is free on Screensaver. But if you want that Batman 89 episode or the Snyderverse episode, go do this stuff at Nerd Riot or Organic Price Books and get a free month of Friends From Work Plus and see if it's for you. All right, we'll be right back. All right, let's get into just a few MCU plot story things, which I think this story is going to end up being pretty important to the MCU. Sam Jackson actually talked about how you have to kind of see this before the Marvels. So we'll see if this wraps neatly or not before that. One of the running questions I've had is, what is going to be the tip that people, humans, I guess, see in Skrulls that tips them off that they're a Skrull? Like at the very beginning when Prescott is ranting about the Skrulls, what is it about Ross that all of a sudden he realizes, I have to kill this guy, this is a Skrull? And how are they going to differentiate that all the time? Because I watched it a second time and all that happens is he says like, no, you can trust me. I'm going to take this to Fury. And as he's doing that, Prescott decides, no, I got to kill this guy. What was it in that conversation that led him to know that?
I feel like it was the insistence on taking the proof with him.
Okay.
Like because it set off some alarms for me too, where it's like he's being too, he's not as alarmed by this as I feel like he should be, and I know he's trying to kind of play off, this is crazy, this is a conspiracy theory.
Right.
But I feel like, but it's so subtle. And I actually really, I really do think, weirdly, that was my favorite scene of the whole series because of how well Martin Freeman plays that. And to your question, I think it's going to have to be really subtle like that. But I think, and that's why I'm so excited for this show, because we've got such an incredible cast. Like,
So they
unlike
can do
anything.
subtlety.
Yeah. I mean, man, the other scene that I loved was the Olivia Colman, Samuel L. Jackson scene.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just getting these masterclass actors in there getting to do this kind of, like, to have all of those particular talents working in the kind of paranoid thriller context is so fun.
Okay. Before that answer, going really quick back to Ross, I love the subtlety in even what they're doing visually. Did you catch his eyes? Like, go back and watch it again when he misses the jump and falls to his death, which, by the way, we just don't typically see that kind of thing in these kind of shows. So that was kind of, whoa. But when he's laying on the ground, they're doing something. His eyes are like extra black. It's almost like he started turning to a scroll maybe like 10%, but didn't lose all of his shape shifting. So it's like the face that's damaged is half scroll almost, just the part that's damaged. But it's like his eye is almost like bigger. I'm doing again video thing. His eye is almost bigger and like kind of almost drooping. And I don't know. There's subtle visual cues of like, oh, he is going to be a scroll, which is cool. Yes, for me, and this plays in episode 2, Olivia Colman was a huge standout for me. I love her confidence, and I love that they have a past relationship working together, and her just straight being blunt, calling him out about being too old. I don't know. That whole thing really worked for me.
Yeah. I mean, and Olivia Colman's one of those actors that just does not take a day off.
You're going to love her in episode 2, which is just a teaser. Man, just a teaser. You're going to love it.
Yeah. I love that. I loved that she's in this show. And then there are actors that we haven't even seen yet. And this is where I think that the show will really take off for me, is when we get a little bit more with Dermot Mulroney and Don Cheadle's storyline. I mean, we saw them for a moment in this episode.
Which the president, we talked about that, I guess, is a nobody. I'm meaning like we didn't know that. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Someone we didn't.
Yeah.
But it is, I feel like Marvel maybe tipping their hand a little bit in terms of us knowing that it will ultimately be.
Sure. Like, could it go so poorly during this series that it leads to like the impeachment or death of the president?
Right.
AKA.
Or is the president a scroll, like we sort of postulated? And
now you have to ask that question about everybody, which is kind of a different thing.
Well, actually, I wanna talk about that briefly, just to get your thoughts on something. So one of the other differences here that I'm curious about, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on what's happening in the Secret Invasion comic, what Brian Michael Bendis did that was so mind-blowing at the time was he had these reveals that characters he had been writing for years in various series had been Skrulls the entire time.
Right.
And he had written it in a way from the beginning to where that held up. It wasn't as though that was a retcon.
Okay.
And so I think people that know that, whether they've read the series or just kind of aware of how that panned out, we've been looking over the last few years at characters asking, oh, is this a Skrull? How long have they been a Skrull? But now I'm wondering, does that mean that Ross has been a Skrull in any other appearance that we've seen? Or does that mean that this was just a Skrull in that exact moment that was impersonating Ross? But that Ross, everything we saw from him in Wakanda Forever, all that was the actual human Ross. What do you think, both, not just with that character, but that's just kind of by way of example, but do you think we're going to get entrenched, this person has been a Skrull for, X number of projects, or do you think it's going to be mostly this, I don't know, are they being impersonated or is it the real one?
Quickly, I just kind of tell everyone who's watching, because we've made so many jokes about watching, my camera's dying. So it's dead. I'm so sorry. So I'm switching over to this other webcam. You'll see me still, but don't judge the quality if that's what it was. Okay, so a little disclaimer there. Sorry, my camera's dead. Fascinating question. Absolutely fascinating. One that I don't want to reveal anything from episode 2, but I don't know. I don't know how much this show is going to get into any past characters type stuff like Bendis did. Like, right. And I don't know this from episode 2, but like, are we going to get into the Sharon, Carter of it all? Like, what did something happen there? Are we going to get into Val? Like, yeah, is that going to be revealed? Or is it going to be like what you're saying? Either characters they introduce in the show and then tell you, oh, that's a Skrull, like the president, theoretically. Or is it going to be that they can just find a picture of Everett Ross and then turn to him? And that doesn't mean that he ever was a Skrull, just that version was. I don't have an answer. I think they would have to do a couple of long-standing characters being Skrulls to have it not feel totally cheap for the show. Right? Like, don't you think they need one or two like big ones? Like if they do like a Sharon was a Skrull the whole time kind of thing, then I think that would help tie the show together a little bit more. If it's only characters that are introduced.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
I think. And I don't have a strong take on the Ross thing. That's interesting.
I mean, I certainly...
I definitely don't think it means he was a Skrull in other projects right now. I don't think it means that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think...
But will it ever mean that? Maybe.
I think in terms of what I would want, I think that I would like some longer term characters. I think I don't really want to go pre-Endgame with that, just because I don't want to start... I don't think that would ever have been the intention. Right, so I don't really want to...
Yes.
That would feel like a retcon. But I think really anything Wanda Vision forward, given that we have a Skrull appearance in Wanda Vision, I think it's all fair games. Basically, like phase 4 onward, I think I would be... Because, the Sharon Carter, like, especially now that I know what the Skrull's intent is, which is to basically turn
how much sense
humans
would
against
that
each
make?
other. It would make so much sense. And even Val, to your point, like just getting in and like the fact that she's the one putting Yelena on Hawkeye's trail. Like if the idea is just to cause chaos, And
that's where I say like maybe the show's not even wrapped though. Like this is way out there, but if Val was a Skrull, maybe they don't stop her pre-Thunderbolts. Maybe the entire Thunderbolts is like organized by a Skrull still.
Yeah.
I don't know that, but...
No, I really, the other thing that I have no idea, I don't think that we're going to get this, which is totally fine. If we did, it would take a decent departure from the premise we've gotten about how Skrull technology works. But in the comics, one thing that I always loved is some of the Skrulls don't even know that they're Skrulls. Like they're so deep undercover that they have actually been tricked by Skrull, like high command, into thinking that they are human so that they can't give themselves away because they don't even know that they have anything to give away. And so there are these big reveals where it's like someone starts, they die or they realize that they're actually a Skrull, and it's tragic for them because they thought they were the real Sharon Carter,
Well, we haven't gotten that deep yet, but there's that line from Gaia where she's like, the longer and the stronger you stay in your shell, the more difficult it becomes for other people to see you. And then we saw that machine, by the way, same machine from Captain Marvel. Shout out our friendly reminder. I highlighted like that exact scene. I love that. But that kind of like knocks them out. That's almost like, it's almost like Inception type stuff where they're out. But yeah, that's kind of a hint at what you're saying. Like maybe you can stay human for so long in that shell that you eventually start feeling so human that you almost forget. I don't know if we'll go that far, but that's kind of a little shout out at that a little bit.
No, I thought about that. Okay, so the other thing, talking about, again, like the comic shout outs and the way that I think it feels very classic MCU of taking a big thing in Marvel Comics and working it in a grounded way. Saber,
Wow.
I'm sure this came out in promotional material. I'm sure there are folks that knew that this was going to be a thing, and I just wasn't tracking it.
Dunder
so
Mifflin
fun.
and Sabre. It's Saber. Dunder Mifflin and Saber. Sabre. Come on. Office reference? That's a deep cut. It's one of the best things there. Saber takes
That
over.
is, what is that, season 7?
But
7,
it's
8?
spelled Sabre, and they make the whole song based on Sabre. It's Saber. Oh. He's like trying to rhyme it still. Sorry. So that's a comics thing too. How much do we know about Saber in the MCU? Because I can't get the trailer of the Marvels out of my head. Is that the only spot, or the Wanda Vision stuff too?
So I don't think that if that was dropped in Wanda Vision, it's not something that I remember. In the comics, it's pretty straightforward. Sword is the kind of extraterrestrial arm of Shield. I mean, they're different agencies, but they function. Whereas Shield is, I mean, literally,
Right.
it's
a
Shield and Sword,
or
right?
We had Sword in WandaVision.
Right.
So,
but what I like here is that we actually see Sword functioning more like it does in the comics.
okay.
Because in WandaVision, it felt more like a heightened version of NASA.
But Saber is just an extension of Sword, you're saying?
It's just the actual space station.
Base. Okay.
It's like the helicarrier of Sword.
Okay. I love it. I'm fascinated that the government, it's kind of Winter Soldier, they're back to building defenses that are extreme measures, to which, if used in the wrong hands, same thing. Regarding that as well, we got so many hints that Nick Fury failed at his objective to find a home, but we still don't know why. Or like they talk about how Fury blipped, but then they talk about how he went away to Saber. But when in there did he fail to find them a planet?
No, that's a great, because they talk about him abandoning them.
Right. But also that was in the 90s, right? So we're now like 30 years later. So there was a lot of time.
Yeah, well,
not just the blip.
I'm really, to your point, there probably there's a lot more going on. And that is where I think I should maybe backtrack in some of my initial exposition dump criticism, because they did lay out some clues that we still don't really know the meaning of yet.
I think they were just dumping the bombing to say this is a terrible event that's going to trigger all these other things.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
I think if we had lingered on the bombing, like didn't dump it, right? You're just doing these little hints. I think it would have felt like it's building up too much to the one event. This bomb.
Yeah, and you know what? That's true. And I like that that's not the final end goal. Like that I'm glad that it wasn't all building up to we have to stop this bombing, and that's the 6th episode.
Correct. Right.
So that's a good point. But from a question perspective, I don't know when Fury would have abandoned them, because Fury he never agreed personally to give them a home. That was all Carol.
Yep.
And also
he brings up Carol here, but yeah.
Right. But it wasn't like, so I just don't think it would have been them saying, oh, you stayed on Earth back in the 90s and that was you abandoning us. I don't know if maybe there was something between that and Infinity War even that we didn't see. We still don't really know what Fury was doing between Age of Ultron and the Infinity War stinger. So there are a lot of gaps to fill in.
But I'm just intrigued that he and Carol failed when it was so many years ago. Like they had so much time to do it. Like, yes, the blip was a big deal, and he changed after the blip, sure. But that's like 7 years ago of 30. What happened in the first 23 years when they were trying to do it?
Well, and
surely we'll get something more on that.
I'm hoping that we get more insights specifically, and I'm sure we will, but specifically into their motivation. Not we know what they're trying to do when I say they being the bad Skrulls. But I want to know why they feel so wounded. And I think this is what's going to point to that. Because just from what we know, it's not as though, I mean, it's not like, or I never got the sense that the Skrulls were intending to come and colonize or take over Earth back in the 90s. And that Carol was like, okay, look, no, if you don't do this, then I promise I'll find you another home. Like, my sense was they were refugees anyway, and she was just willing to help them out. So it's interesting that rather than them seeing that and saying, oh, well, you know, like, that didn't work out, but we're just going to kind of go out on our own and figure something out ourselves, that they feel like there was some broken promise and that they're now owed restitution. Right?
Yeah, no comment.
Okay, interesting.
Is there more to the Soren being dead thing? That feels like a pretty big reveal that his wife, who we saw in Far From Home, is dead. He said that Gaia's boss is who killed her. Mm-hmm. That's just crazy. Maria being dead is crazy. I said that right, but yeah. I guess we haven't seen a lot of Maria recently, but still.
I kept expecting her. I mean, I was wondering if she was going to turn to a Skrull there in the final moments. Obviously, she didn't. But it is interesting that she and Soren both are now dead, when the last time we saw Soren, she was impersonating Maria Hill.
Right. That's fascinating. So we lost both of the same character.
I know. Yeah, there's no... Although I do wonder... I just wonder if Soren's even really dead.
Oh, like, wow.
I don't know. Like, I'm just...
That would be such a weird thing to fake for Talos. Or maybe Talos doesn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I don't know. One thing that I do love about Talos in that regard, by the way, is that I like that when we first met him, he was kind of the leader of the Skrull forces, and
now he's been cast out.
Yeah, and it puts him in a similar spot to Fury, in that, you know, Fury used to be
the old guys.
Yeah, he was like the most powerful guy in the world in some senses, and now they're both kind of on their own and having to just rely on their whatever instincts and capabilities they have apart from the systems.
The Avengers got a shout out here as like a little
one of my favorite
was his
lines.
Midlife crisis.
I love that.
Okay, just this is how we like to end it. Rapid fire, few things. Did you notice they shortened the Marvel Studios logo? They tightened it up now. I think that's going to be what it's going to be going forward in these series. So instead of, I guess I didn't mind it, but instead of sitting through the whole thing, it kind of starts with a little credit thing and just goes to a new logo. You'll notice it. One of the lines I thought was fascinating was the one they kicked off the show with, which was, imagine a society where information can't be trusted. Not that hard to imagine, right? Like, it feels pretty current in that way. That's kind of cool. I also wanted to shout out two things about the new Skrullos and the Skrulls. I like the little undercover slogan of home in my own skin. I don't know if that's from the comics, but I think that's like a good code word line and fits.
I don't. Yeah, I like that. And I don't think that's from the comics that I've read.
Okay, and is this from the comics? Because I think it's genius, the radiation thing. Maybe that's because I just watched Chernobyl. But I love that plot point that the Skrulls are immune to radiation, so they're hiding out in places where humans can't go.
Right.
That is that in the comics? That's genius. That's a great plot point.
That's great. And just to clarify, is their plan to set off a nuclear world war?
I think, yeah, maybe. they're definitely trying to get everyone fighting so that there are more spots like that. They eventually, I think, would prefer all of humans to be erased and then just live on Earth. But if it happens to be nuclear war doing that, then there are more spots they could live because of the radiation, right? So kind of double whammy. So like even if not all humans were wiped from the face of the Earth, there would still be more of it for them.
Yeah, it is. Because I was just thinking that would be like, even if the radiation doesn't harm them, I would think that
there'd be a lot of rebuilding.
Worldwide nuclear holocaust would not, like, that wouldn't make for a particularly hospitable planet.
No, they'd have to rebuild. I think they want humans out of the way. That's the point.
Yeah. Which I want to hear all of your final bullet points, and then I have one thing that I kind of love that I want to wrap with on my end.
Okay, real fast bullet points. I really liked the interrogation scene with Talos and Fury on the bomb maker. Like, I like seeing Fury kind of have that confidence back for a second. I loved his line of, you just told one lie and everyone gets one, but nobody gets two. Oh, you just told the second one. I just told you nobody gets two. Like, I love that kind of Fury. That was fun. And I like their dynamic back and forth of him poking fun of him being like, I know a bunch of really good looking Skrulls and you are not one of them. Like that kind of thing. Like the relationship, that interrogation, I was into that.
Which, by the way, to that point, he made a couple of comments, Fury, in the first episode, alluding to his 30-year history with the Skrulls.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously, we've never seen any interaction outside of Captain Marvel and, you know, the credits of Far From Home. So I think I had always assumed, you know, he maybe reconnected with the Skrulls following the blip, which, I think happened to some degree, but I did not. I like how much they're leaning into him being really familiar and really close with certain Skrulls. And I'm excited to see what that looked like what the kind of secret history of Nick Fury is there.
Absolutely. And my final bullet point, you brought up Falcon Winter Soldier. I think this is another parallel to Falcon Winter Soldier. Like, this feels like a buddy cop thing in a way that I'm already way more bought into for me personally, whether it's the performances, the writing, or the story they're trying to convey anyways. That just works. And another thing I like is, like I said earlier, I like that instead of just running with the buddy cop of like, hey, here are two guys that don't agree with each other, and throughout this series, they're going to come closer. I like, hey, these are guys that had a history and a relationship, and we've seen that more than we ever saw Bucky and Sam have one. But look at this brewing tension that might ultimately tear them apart. Which is like Fury shot him, and he's like, dude, I'm trying not to kill any of my people. Like, you still don't get it.
Which
there's just some brewing there. It'd be really fun if that kind of eventually, goes the other direction.
No, 100%. Yeah, and the way that Ben Mendelsohn delivers that line was so clutch in that way, I think, because there's a world in which that's overacted and it's too kind of Shakespearean and, I am betrayed now, and it's just forecasting this, this is exactly the dispute. But I like that it's more coming out of a place of, it's like a woundedness, and you're not quite sure in that moment if he's wounded by fury or if he's wounded by the fact that he just had to fight his own kind, or that he was called a traitor, or just the whole situation. Like, it's, again, there's a real subtlety there that I think is so crucial to this entire series. Like, I think when this show works the best for me so far, it's when they're leaning into that.
Absolutely. Again, I don't want to add anything there. So what's your final point? And then I'll give it a little quick grade.
Perfect. I've got just something that I thought about, and this is, you may know more from having seen another episode, but I was thinking, why don't the Skrulls just try to come and peacefully live? The world now knows about aliens, and it seems like there's a world where that would be okay. But then I was thinking, and part of me,
which pause real quick. Talos says that, right? He has the plant he's growing. I caught that in the second viewing.
Yes.
And Sam Jackson says, you always thought the assimilation to Earth was possible.
Yeah, that's true. which was a
keep
great,
going. Yeah.
I loved that scene as well. But I was just thinking, I'm sure that most of the folks that are part of New Scrollos will I don't know, be bested in some way. But to the extent they're not, I started thinking, okay, we already have New Asgard. We're living in this post-blip world where Earth was invaded by aliens now for the second time. And the Asgardians are technically aliens. If the Skrulls were to kind of go public and just try to live on the Earth, that's now another colony of aliens. And I started thinking, if Marvel wanted to build to another kind of Civil War-ish
But
conflict.
amongst like races of aliens now living on Earth.
Well, that for sure, because that's because there's kind of the Kree Skrull War is one of the famous Marvel epics. But I was even thinking, at some point, are humans going to be fed up with
like
all of these Avenger-related peoples coming to live on the planet? And could it be this, okay, now it's like in the same way that the governments of Earth decided, okay, we can't let the Avengers function without any kind of oversight. And so it sort of became governments versus Avengers and then Avengers versus Avengers. Could we wind up with a situation where there are people on Earth saying, look, like this is almost like a xenophobia thing, but turning into this is too far. And then you have some Avengers saying, yeah, that's fair. And then other Avengers saying, like Thor and Captain Marvel saying like, no, I feel like it could build to an interesting ideological conflict.
And that feels so much like the mutant thing. Like that just triggered the mutant part in my brain.
Yeah.
Like maybe we're talking years down the road. We're talking like 2028 at this point, post Secret Wars. Like maybe that could be a plot line that now mutants are also there. And so like you have all these different non-technically human people all over, Skrulls, New Asgardians, mutants. And it's like, yeah, that could play into it maybe.
I wasn't even thinking about this at the time, but yeah, I mean, in going back to Bendis's run, the way he kind of caps off his first big arc is in this 4-issue event called Siege. And what happens is Asgard is kind of on Earth during that phase in the way they are now in the MCU, but they're in Oklahoma instead of Norway. And there's a moment that's basically orchestrated by, we've talked about the role that Norman Osborn plays within that era of Marvel Comics, where he's kind of the dark Nick Fury, where he basically orchestrates this attack and makes it look like it came from Asgardians, and therefore kind of fosters this conflict and gets people really riled up against the Asgardians. And then he's able to use that as a pretext to then go and attack them himself. And I'm starting to see, like, because of what's going on with the Skrulls, because of the level of like doubt that this could sow within, just if people realize how infiltrated the Skrulls are, and it's just, it could develop this very us against them mentality.
And then in that case, I kind of would like to see New Skrullos, and especially like how fun would it be to see New Asgard more developed? Like we saw what Valkyrie has done thus far, but what if the next time we check in on them, like you look and it looks more like Nashville or Chicago, and all of a sudden it's this is getting like, right now you're thinking it's just a few people living on the coast. There's it looks like there's 5,000 people max.
Yeah,
max. And it would just be interesting to see like, oh wow, they've grown. There's 200,000 people and they have like a city and they're building up their like Bifrost or something. And it's like, okay, this is getting like, whoa, like
it would be because in Endgame, it looks like a straight up kind of refugee village. They're still making their way. And then in Love and Thunder, it's more developed. But yeah, I wonder, like, are we ever going to see something that looks more like Asgard, like original Asgard.
And guess what else I just thought of? I'm now also thinking, what about like the Namor's people and Wakanda? Like you have all these different now, like they're humans, but you know what I mean? Like humans, quote unquote, people. This could be,
no, I mean,
maybe we're onto
yeah,
something
Namor's people especially, yeah.
Yeah, like he wants the surface world gone, right? So
and he wants them at war with each other, I think. And
yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. All right. Okay.
See, I like it. This is a, we've talked about the kind of tracing the line through the more grounded films. And I know this is dealing with aliens, but it does feel in that way like you could start to see, whether this is the intention, a through line from Falcon Winter Soldier to Wakanda Forever to Secret Invasion.
For me, episode 1 is somewhere between a Let's Go or Let's Go Plus. If you're just new to this podcast, that's our grading, our rating system. That would be equivalent to like a B or a B plus. My overall initial social media reaction, I gave it like an 8.7 out of 10. So that tells you a little bit of how much I enjoyed episode 2. And again, when you get these screeners, you get 2 episodes, we watch them back to back. It gets really hard. You know, I'm not watching it weekly, so it gets it really hard to separate the two. So that's why I rewatched the first one before this episode. But I would say this one isolated, Let's Go or Let's Go Plus. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a straight flat Let's Go.
Okay.
Mostly because of the like what I love is the potential for what's coming. I love all the ingredients. I'm excited. I'm invested. I love how much this feels like it could change the hierarchy of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Black Adam shows up. No.
Yeah. So let's go for me.
Hey, look. If you go back and listen on this podcast, we gave the first 2 episodes of Miss Marvel Let's Freaking Goes, maybe Let's Freaking Go pluses for the second one. We did the same thing with Hawkeye, and some of those shows massively dipped in the middle for us to where we even did That's Sad or that missed opportunity with a few episodes. Yeah. So, hey, I'd rather it be the other way. I'd rather say let's go, and then next week is like a Let's Freaking Go minus, and then we just keep going from there. That's what I would rather have happen. So
yeah. And I'm
especially with a show
like
this where it's slower pace and takes some time to develop, I'm more concerned now, talking Andor, like I'm now more concerned that 6 episodes might not be enough. Like to fully flesh this out, do we need 8, 9, or 10? Whereas I don't think I felt that way with Miss Marvel. I was like, these are awesome standalone, but there's not so much introduced here that like, how could they possibly wrap it in 4.5 hours or whatever? I'm more like, ooh, we'll see.
If anything, with Miss Marvel, I feel like the length was
almost detriment. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, if they had just, it felt overstuffed, but I don't think the answer would have been more episodes. I think it would have been less plot.
Correct.
But yeah, here I totally agree. I'm curious to follow along episode by episode and see a couple of the concerns that not concerns is maybe even strong, but but some of the camera work that I talked about not loving as much, and a couple of the moments that I thought could have just been a little bit tighter from a writing perspective, I think could change a lot just if we have a different script writer or if we have a different cinematographer. And I'm not sure what the situation here with this series is. I know like with Moon Knight, we got to interview a cinematographer for I think 2 or 3 of the episodes, but there was another cinematographer for the other ones. And, all of these shows are kind of normally rotating writers, at least as the script writing credits go. So it makes a lot of sense to me that a second episode could build on this foundation and improve.
If you liked what you heard today, we are so excited to have you here. There are so many ways you can get involved, but just for now, as I mentioned, you listening is amazing. Thank you. We are very grateful. If you can subscribe and like on all those platforms, that would be very helpful. But we will be going through all of this stuff weekly for the next 6 weeks, talking about Secret Invasion. And then on top of that, as we mentioned, we have a promo going for Friends from Work Plus, where you can check out our coverage of other films as well. And some of those will be on Screensaver. So there are ways to get involved if you like what you hear. We are so excited to have you guys here. We'll be back a week from today, again, talking about Secret Invasion Episode 2, which I teased that I love. And our goal is to add joy to this community in general and add joy and fulfillment to these shows. So if you want to be a part of the discussion, we'll see you back here next week on Friends from Work.